Hello, and welcome to this episode of Coastal Catch-Ups. Thank you very much for joining me. It's been a while since I've recorded one, and I've just been quite busy the past few weeks. But anyway, I'm not here to give excuses. Um, this episode is about my time in New Zealand, and don't worry, I'm not here to bore you with how great my holiday was and stuff like that. I I've basically picked a few locations I visited, and I've kind of taken something away from each of these locations. So the locations are Milford Sound, Piu Piu Thai, so that's a joint name between English and Maori. Um, and I'm going to talk a few things about carrying capacity of tourism sites. Uh, it's not too technical, don't worry. It's keeping it very high level, and then the wildlife on those sites as well. Um, the other area I'm going to touch on is a site near Dunedin, which is the Royal Albatross Centre, and that seabird, which is ginormous. It's the first time I've seen one, but I'm just going to discuss about the challenges that species encounters in its life, and also what the management of that site is doing to help protect that population on that area just outside Dunedin on the Otago Peninsula. And then lastly, I'm actually going to touch a bit on the Maori people. I've done some reading on how their practices of managing the environment actually could play a critical role in our coastline and marine areas today. Um, so yeah, I'm going to try and tie those two together. It's really interesting, and I probably will talk about that more in the future. Because yeah, there's so much to cover in that, but we'll touch on it today, and we'll take it from there. Um, so that's the podcast today. Just another quick reminder of on the Wednesday, 27th of December, doing our first coastal meetup. So that's just a walk if you're interested along. It's at Delmont Country Park in County Down in Northern Ireland. If you're interested in coming along to that, there's no agenda, there's nothing. It's literally just a meet up of people, and just to kind of create like a little community, and we're just going to do a walk, maybe grab a coffee afterwards. Very laid back, very chill. If you're interested in coming along to that, you're very welcome. You can join our WhatsApp group. I'll pop a link in the bio of this episode if you want to join. You can join that and then keep up to date with the details of that walk and then future events in the future coming into 2024. Can you believe it? So yeah, that's that. And yeah, without further ado, I'll get into the episode.
It's all about Marie and the coastal sea, aquatic life and everything in between. So sit on down and take a seat. Coastal catch-ups with the Stampede.
So, as I mentioned, the first site I'm going to chat about is Milford Sound, Pio Pio Thai. So, like I mentioned, that's a joint name between the Maori and English name. The English name is named after Milford Haven, which the area was discovered by a Welshman, and he named the sound after him, or after that location when he found it. The area it's a glacial valley, so if you've been or if you've seen photos of it, it's a really steep-sided valley and filled with seawater. So there's a narrow entrance, and then it's just a big long uh, loch. You probably call it in Scotland or in the UK. But yeah, it's salt water, really high. The highest cliff is 1,200 meters, sheer rock face, and it's renowned for its natural beauty and landscape. So um, it was named a sound, but it's actually a ford. It's in the Fordland National Park in New Zealand, and fords are created through glacial erosion, where sounds are actually created through river erosion. So, a bit of a mix up there in the naming of it, but it's stuck anyway, and that's what it's known for now. Um, in terms of the Maori name for it, Pio Tai, that's actually named after a thrush-like bird. And there is a story behind that, but I don't know enough about it to go into it now. But basically, it's a symbol for a significant cultural symbol for the Maori people in that area, and that's what it was named after. There's two permanent waterfalls. There is a couple of other ones, but it relies on the rainfall. So if there's a lot of rainfall, temporary waterfalls or ephemeral waterfalls, I think that's what you call temporary waterfalls. Um, they come alive, whereas these two just remain permanent even in the drier times. In its history, I said it was discovered by a Welshman. Can't remember his name, but it wasn't discovered by Captain Cook. When you hear about these places, you normally associate these places to be associated with Captain Cook's expedition, but he actually missed it twice. So when you're outside the sound, looks like a bay. You can't see the inlet, the sound, and that's why it was missed twice by Captain Cook. Um, and of course, he didn't discover the Maori people were there long before the Europeans arrived, hence why the Maori name is used in the name of the area as well. If you arrive in Milford Sound, you get taken out in a boat, and you can take in the scenery. And there's a couple of New Zealand fur seals there, and there is Fordland penguins as well, which are a yellow crested penguin, and they've got like a yellow eyebrow, quite cool looking. They nest along the shores in the area as well. You can see them hopping along the rocks. So the area actually has black coral as well. So it's not like normal coral where you'd associate with nice bright coral reefs. It is associated with not having algae present attached to the coral. So it doesn't require light, and that therefore it can thrive quite well, even though the sound's probably relatively shallow compared to where this species would normally be found. It's because of a dark layer of surface water along the water. So the fresh water and salt water don't mix that well. You have um, biomolecules called tannins in the fresh water, which kind of decrease the light being allowed down to the seabed, which allows this coral to survive here. So quite interesting. I had no idea about this on my tour. Obviously, you can't see it. It was only until I read afterwards about it. So quite interesting. Just wanted to go into a bit more detail on the New Zealand fur seal before going forward and talking about the carrying capacity of Milford Sound. So the fur seal was hunted. It was hunted by Maori populations as well as the European settlers, and it was very close to extinction. I think I read somewhere it was one of the first species protected in New Zealand, but I can't be certain on that right now. But anyway, it's now classed as least concern, so the population has bounced back. And I know of reports there's tensions between the seal populations and fishermen, because they're obviously after the same fish. Um, the main cause of death nowadays is entanglement and drowning in fishing gear. So we're no longer being hunted, but there's still a risk to them in the oceans. Looking back on it, there's actually I know there's tension today, but the seals actually caused tension between Maori population and European hunters back in the day. There was the Sealers' War between 1810 and 1821. Bit of history for you, and there's I think light squabbles that just escalated in the violence, basically. Yeah, interesting that an animal can cause conflict between humans. Probably is. If I have a think, there's probably more examples of that. But if you can think of any, let me know. Um, the sea lion, or sorry, the Zealand fur seal looks very similar. Well, for me, looking at it without any comparison, it looked quite similar to a sea lion. Sea lions are a lot bigger. The fur seal also has a longer nose, so there's some distinct differences. And when you have a photo of the two species, you can tell how much bigger the sea lion is. But when you first see it from a distance, it is quite hard to tell the difference. Now, I just wanted to talk about the carrying capacity of Milford Sound. Now, carrying capacity is a term that applies. You can, in this case, it's about tourism, but it can apply to populations of humans or other species. And it's basically the ability for a particular habitat or area to withstand a number of species. So in this case, it's the number of humans in Milford Sound before the quality, environmental quality, is taken away because of too many humans running about the place on boats. So, hope I explained that well enough. But um, so basically, you, you kind of get the drift. There's probably other places you think you've been in. It's really it's like that Instagram versus reality thing. You think you see a photo of somewhere and it looks really picturesque, scenic, really quiet, and then you get there and people are queuing up for this one spot to get a photo. That's kind of what I'm getting at here. It's actually when you get there, it's taken away from um the qualities that make that area beautiful. And it can also apply to the conservation objectives as well. If there's species, if say there's bottlenose dolphins visit the sound, if there's too many boats in the water, it could disrupt their behavior, feeding patterns. So you can look at it from outside the landscape, scenic aspect, and look at purely the effect on the ecosystem as well. But anyway, so in 2007, they didn't cap, they suggested a cap of 4,000 tourists a day at this site, but it was never enforced. Now, I assume that it hasn't been enforced, so it hasn't been stuck to. But ultimately, there needs to be a balance between tourism and the conservation of the site. So a study in 2021 actually found 80% of the visitors. So I thought this would be interesting to see actually what the people thought, what the people visiting Milford Sounds, what they actually thought of the area. Is it too overcrowded? And 80% of them said it is not crowded. So um, there's a lot of worry about the management of the site, but it's interesting to see the perception of people actually visiting. It's at the end of the day, it's subjective. People could have an image in their head that this is a really picturesque, quiet place, or others probably maybe realize that this site is one of the most popular sites in New Zealand to visit, and therefore we're maybe expecting crowds to get there. So, in terms of managing this, I was reading that there's so obviously the tour operators want to continue. There's chat about having larger planes fly people in, uh, to reduce the number of planes flying up and down the sound, because when planes come in, they fly down the sound to land and then fly back up it. There's also a really, I think, during the peak season from 11 to 1, that's when most people arrive from buses, and then it's really, really busy from that time, and then it probably before and after is not as busy. So it's maybe like spreading the crowds out. In terms of cruise ships, I actually, uh, when we visited the site, if a cruise ship would have been in that sound while I was there, I think I would have been very disappointed. One, because it would just ruin, yeah, it would ruin the scenery and any photographs, or yeah, it would just be awful. But they do come in and they do need permission to come in to the sound, and I assume they go in and out. I assume they can't stay for that long. But yeah, so that's sort of the challenges that that site's facing. There is management plans. So there's a paper I was reading, they're calling for more clear cut management plans for the site, to make sure that its beauty is maintained ultimately. Um, so yeah, that's just a brief introduction to the carrying capacity of the site. You might hear me talking about that again for other sites around our coast, but yeah, that was just an example of Milford Sound. The next site I want to talk about is the Royal Albatross Centre, which is just located outside Dunedin on the east side of South Island in New Zealand. So it's located on the Otago Peninsula, just right at the end, and the site is known for its Northern Royal Albatross colony. And there's a centre set up there to help to allow visitors to visit the colony, but also provide support to the um, colony in terms of management as well by trained people and conservationists. So the albatross, you probably heard of it in terms of the wandering albatross, gets that name because it can spend, I think, 85% of its life at sea. In particular, the juveniles will spend 3 to 5 years at sea as well. and they can travel up to 190,000 kilometers a year. So that's a fair amount of mileage. And they also have really large wingspans. So, for example, if you visit this site, you can pick out the albatross quite easily because they have a very long wingspan, up to 3 meters in some cases. So you can pick them out in compared to the gulls. Um, as I said, it's managed by the centre, and it's probably one of the most intensely managed colonies in the world. The colony first appeared during World War I, I think. A couple of albatross tried to lay eggs there. I think the first one was eaten by a local, which is absolutely typical of humans. But sure, it's good to see we're now here. And that was the first conservation work was done by a fella, Lance Richdale. And from there, it's just spiraled. Um, so it's clear from studies that the conservation work has helped. It hasn't hindered species. There has been one report I read that the conservation is so hands-on. There was a slight reduction on juveniles that were um, hand-reared, i.e., whether they were abandoned at the nest and they're taken in by humans to feed and such. There's a slight decrease in their life expectancy once they go to sea, but nonetheless, at least they are out at sea rather than they would initially never have made it. Um, so yeah, that's one study I read. And then other measures, if you go onto the Royal Albatross Centre website, you'll see live CCTV or surveillance of the birds. So they use that to monitor the bird nests. They also can take eggs in and incubate them. And like I said about hand rearing, and when parents abandon their chicks or something happens to the parents and the chicks are abandoned, they can take them in and feed them. The incubation, I'll just say that one of the predators, so there's predators that would get the eggs, such as rodents and other mammals. But one thing I read was about blowfly, and they actually lay their eggs in. It takes a couple of days for the eggs to hatch, and it takes a couple of days for the eggs to hatch, and the eggs from the blowfly, if they lay the eggs in the egg, it can they turn into larvae. I can imagine it's pretty gross, but there's a high possibility that the chicks will die if that happens. So they can take the eggs in and basically raise them that way. So and protect them when they're hatching. So in my mind, it's very um complex because you're real. It's probably one of the in terms of I've read things about human intervention in wildlife, but this is probably very, very hands-on and very involved in the life of these birds. So I remember one of the Airbnbs I was staying at had a book about it, or had a chapter on it, and it said like raised a question of whether these birds are actually wild if there's so much intervention in allowing them to survive. And yeah, that's a question that could be answered. But as long as the centre's there and doing the work and helping the species thrive, and yeah, like can't tell them not to do it. So but yeah, anyway, so I mentioned about the juveniles, so they go out to sea for 3 to 5 years, but also if their first flight off the cliffs don't go well and they end up at the bottom of the cliff, and they still survive, and they can be recovered and brought in, and then released again once they're fit to go. So yeah, that's a like we get a yeah. If I was an albatross, I wouldn't mind having a wee second chance. So yeah. Um, once the birds get out in the water, there's also other threats. So it's not all plain sailing once they get out there. First threat is plastic. So in the center, they have a display, and I'm sure you've seen it in documentaries before when they dissect dead birds and animals, and their guts are filled with small plastics. It's quite unbelievable that, but it, that happens, but it's not a surprise the amount of shite in the water. And they pick these up thinking they're small fish, or perhaps the fish they're eating have small plastics in. Like it's a complete mess. Bottom line. And unfortunately, that's not going to change until uh, I can't see it changing. It'll be like the crap going in the water. But and I've said before, cleanup operations are good, but at the end of the day, if you look at the waste hierarchy, and the first level of the hierarchy is prevention, and it's preventing this stuff getting into the water. So you see technology of rivers with nets, catching all this stuff before it goes into the water, which is really important. But yeah, I think I'll draw a line under there because that's another episode in itself. Fishing as well is another threat. So in particular long lining. So if you don't know what long lining is, it's basically fishermen lay a line off the back of the boat. I think it can be long up to kilometers, with hooks dangling down, baited hooks. Problem is, once it's released, the hooks, if they're high enough that can be reached by seabirds diving, they can dive, catch, and eat the bait and get caught in the hook, and therefore, instead of pulling up fish, they pull up dead seabirds. Um, one of the, I suppose, mitigation to help reduce seabird mortality in long lines is they've came up with, it's called a hook pod, and the hooks get, once the hooks are in position, or sent out the back of a boat, this wee device covers the hook, so it can't be eaten, or it can't catch on a seabird. Um, and this it's not until the hook sinks down beyond the diving level, which I can't remember, maybe 20 meters. I can't remember how far these birds dive down in the water column, but there's a wee pressure sensor, and then it releases a hook, so the hook is out of range from the seabird. Now you could go into the whole topic about fishing practices and long lining and how sustainable that is, but we're not going to now. We're focusing on seabirds. So, and I've read that can practically eliminate seabird catch on long lining. So that's a positive, and that's good. The other issue is climate change. So rising temperatures in the water will push some prey further down in the cooler water. So um, that was on the website for, where did I get that information? That was on the Albatross Centre website. Didn't read a study for that, but if I find that, I'll share it. And yeah, just finally, there's clear evidence that the management has helped the species thrive. Um, so there's a comparison whether the probable numbers, if there was an intervention for this species on the Otago Peninsula, would be far lower if there was an intervention. So yeah, that's the albatross. That gives you a bit of insight about the conservation work going on there, and the species itself. Lots of subtopics, all interweb of um, ocean topics, with plastic coming in there, climate change, and fishing. So three biggies, which you could spend a lot more time on, but we'll draw a line under it there. The last topic I wanted to talk about was the Maori people and their relationship with the sea. Now, I'll not cover every topic in that subject, because you could go on in terms of for settling on New Zealand and navigation, traditional navigation techniques, which is absolutely fascinating. Using the stars and other natural factors. But one thing I came across when reading about the traditional practices of fishing was the rahui. Now, apologies if I'm pronouncing that wrong, but it's an ancient form of marine management, basically. And the idea is it's a restriction. So the word means, I think it's translated in the English, it means reserved, maybe. But the idea is basically it's an area of the sea is put out of prohibited for fishing. And it's fascinating because it's almost like an ancient type, or an old traditional type of marine conservation, which when you think of all legislation and the jargon and acronyms of all the marine designations and directives and all the rest these days. Um, this is just a simple practice of community knowing the importance of the ocean and what it can provide, and having the sense and zero greed or ignorance of extracting and knowing how nature works and how you can work with it. So I'll explain a bit about this. Um, so as I said, it's a type of marine management. So an area, say you have an area in the water where it's popular for fishing, you would have in this case study I read, you have three zones, and one zone is completely off limits to fishing. And the idea is it allows fish species to recover and um, more fish, more things to eat, right? So, but it's off limits. And then two sides, either side, are temporarily open. So one of the sides could be open while the other one's closed. The closed ones, fish populations are recovering while this one is fished. Now, it can be specific to the area. If there's a particular type of fishing, it doesn't really have an impact on the species. It can be allowed, or perhaps, for example, spearfishing. If it's a particular type of species that's heavily impacted by spearfishing, it's banned and it's not allowed. But then once the area that's open is becoming low on fish stock, it's closed, allow it to recover, and then the other one opens. So it's kind of working with nature and knowing what is required to allow it to recover, and it's basically not touching it and or having a human impact on it, and letting it recover. So yeah, massive increases in fish numbers on these closed sites and also on the open sites, which give food to the communities. And there's a lot of community involvement. So this case study I read was actually about an island in French Polynesia. Um, it is it's something the community is heavily involved, which is something we don't see in probably the Western countries. It's in the law, and that's written. Whereas this one, it's a lot more fluid. This community makes the decisions. It enforces the law, and not in terms of like pitchforks, but trying to engage with fishermen to make sure they're adhering to the laws. And if making them understand that by doing this, it helps the entire community. Um, and yeah, so that's Rahui. And there's a quote here it was a minister of one of the islands, I think the Minister of the Environment or whatever. But he says, today it seems like the world in general always relies on scientific research to find solutions, but we also need to ask our elders. First Polynesians arrived in the Pacific 4,000 years ago, and if we are still here today, it's because we know how to live and survive with our own solutions. So he has a point. I think there's a lot to learn from that, and I think it has been applied. That book I read recently by Charles Clover, Rewilding the Sea, points to this method as well, about allowing marine areas to recover by having them closed off. But then in this case, it's also about how does the community survive these islands. You can't say no fishing because that's how are they going to survive. So it was an interesting topic on a real life area and how they can manage it. So that is the podcast finished. Just to recap, talked about um, Milford Sound, carrying capacity, the wildlife there. Touched briefly on fur seals, how they went from near extinction to flourishing now. And then on carrying capacity, it's basically the ability for a site to withstand a number of people or species. It can be applied to animals as well. So yeah, interesting, and hopefully we'll see maybe some management techniques come out for Milford to see how they will manage tourist numbers in the future with much of space. The Royal Albatross Centre covered the life in albatross and the main threats and how they can be mitigated by before they fledge and once they're in the water. So hopefully learn to take something away from that in terms of, and for me, I thought the hook pods and applying some new technology to fishing practices was really interesting, and that can be, and the fact they can completely mitigate seabird bycatch on long lines is really interesting. And then finally, I talked about rahui, the restricting fishing practices, and it's been a while. That practice has been about for a while, and how we can apply it to today's world with island communities, and how we can work with nature. And it is a good example of sustainability in terms of the working with the environment, but also providing an economic in terms of people maybe selling fish to live, and yeah, it's on the social side of people being able to live by the coast. So yeah, really interesting topic, and yeah, I'll probably, it's something that's kind of interested me more recently. So I'll maybe try and write up something about that, but we'll see if I get the time. It's a busy time of year coming to Christmas. And yeah, just one last reminder about the coastal meetup. I'll pop the link in the bio if you're interested. If you live in County Down or Belfast area, you're more than welcome. It'd be great to meet you. We can chat about coastal stuff, or we can chat about Christmas. We don't. It's like I said earlier. There's no agenda. It's just a meet up with people and friends. So I'll wrap it up there. Just want to say thank you very much for listening. I know it's been a while since the last episode, but I'll hopefully get some more episodes pumped out here with some interesting people. And yeah, I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.